All right, welcome, well, Facebook world. She's Velvet Steel. This is part 2 of Sunday Night Coffee Talk with Regan and Ryan Murray, my tanner and more put together half.
And more bearded.
More bearded, yes. I don't know if you can notice the difference if you compared last week's with this week's, but this is all my own handiwork of dyeing at home. So I feel like it looks natural. Yeah, so we just want to jump right into things because it's been the weekend, so we've had a lot of time together. So anytime you have multiple hours together, it gives you, what would you say, bonding time?
Yeah.
Extra communication.
Extra conflict resolution opportunities.
Absolutely. So we had the whole weekend to prepare to figure out how we could resolve conflict with each other. So
I feel like we've had our whole life to prepare.
Our whole life, maybe. Well, we're going to get another minute. So, Mommy. All right. So we're going to jump right into. I need this. Okay, go out. Yeah. Right. So actually, our special guest tonight is going to be our daughter, and we'll talk about how to discipline your kids without leaving a mark. I'm glad I only got 2 people live on that one. All right. So that being said, go ahead. Do you want to start us off with your statistics?
This is Reagan's intro. So yeah. So anyway, so we're talking about communication and conflict resolution today. As Regan put up there, fight or flight. And, you know, the interesting thing is there was a national study done on over 40,000 couples. And it basically looked and found out that the most important factor, according to these 40,000 plus couples, that the largest indicator of happy and unhappy couples is the level of communication. And
I just thought it was not having children. Okay.
That's number 2. That's number 2. Good communication basically is a foundation of all good relationships, and relationships that are healthy. It increases intimacy. It helps to resolve conflicts and provides and contributes to the overall satisfaction of a relationship. Whereas poor communication increases defensiveness. It creates barriers to resolving conflict and eventually leads to a loss of intimacy. And so as we look at those things, we see how communication and not just how we communicate in the good times, but also especially how we communicate when things are difficult. It's could really make or break a relationship, especially over time, as sometimes, you know, situations and all that are build off of each other. So what would you have to say about that?
I zoned out slightly there.
All right, I'm carrying.
Actually, I thought what I did think is interesting, because of the 2 of us, I mean, if you're going to talk about good communication, I think one of us is what we consider a master communicator. Should that be a fair statement?
I don't know if I'd say master, but
Yoda of communication. I did get I feel the fact that I got a scholarship at college for communication would be
not communication debate, which is a fancy term for arguing.
That is true. So that's why conflict resolution is going to be one of our hot topics. But yeah, I do feel like even though they talk about healthy communication, I think that leads into different styles of communication, because as you might have noticed, I'm definitely more the verbal of the 2 of us. And when it comes to, I might forget everything else, but when it comes to any kind of argument or communication thing, I feel by far I typically win. Right?
Not that we're keeping points.
Okay. Well, I didn't realize that. So, but by saying that, when I say that I win in good communication, it's just because luckily, like, my brain starts working pretty rapidly, and I'm able to put my senses together and come up with my arguments pretty succinctly most of the time.
And there's actual research that kind of talks about how
Call him Dr. Ryan tonight.
how learning how to manage and resolve conflict, especially in a state of because many times we think of conflict, one of the emotions that we always attach to it is anger, and a lot of times when two people are in conflict, there is going to be some hurt feelings, some anger, some just all that kind of stuff. But in an angry state, a physiological process occurs, and so what basically happens is your brain and your body doesn't know the difference between a relationship struggle and a physical threat, and so your body and your brain actually go into conflict resolution that way, either fight or flight. So with that, what basically happens physiologically is all of the brain, all the blood rushes away from the frontal portion or the frontal lobes of your brain, which are basically, and which basically kind of help process communication, and adrenaline kicks up, and you go into that, heavy breathing starts to, maybe it's just me. But anyway.
I just want to know, is this for men and for women, or is this just for guys?
This is people all across the board. That when they go into fight or flight, they, you start, and that's why a lot of times so
you're the flight and I'm more the fight.
You could say that,
Yeah.
But, well,
which is I don't think
not necessarily, because sometimes you can train yourself to either be a fight or a flight, depending upon if you've maybe fought or you started off fighting and you might have had so many negative consequences as a result of that. Sometimes people can shift and change their approach and their focus, and you might see this where somebody looks like they might check out, or whereas they've fought for so long and they have this idea, I can't fight any longer, I'm done, and then they start to just, check out, and flight is more of like avoiding conflict at all costs, and just to kind of save face. But basically what happens when you're in that process is, because of the fight or flight syndrome that happens, you end up saying things out of either an offensive or a defensive mode, so either to hurt or to protect. And as you do that, you'll probably say things that you'll regret. And I know a lot of times when we've gotten into arguments and conflict, I've learned that I've had to walk away from a lot of them and allow myself to decompress, because I would say a lot of things, or I would think a lot of things that if they came out of my mouth, I would really regret those things. And, and I've said some things that I've regretted. And, so that's kind of what happens physiologically when you go through that. So, well, you did like 12 years ago, I hope. And so if you're still hanging on to it, we'll hold that for another session.
I forgive you for this too, right now.
Got it. So.
Interesting. I mean, what I have to say, number one is interesting, is trying to have a discussion about arguments on a Sunday night. So thank you for everybody that's bearing with us. Tomorrow I'm going in at my normal coffee talk time to get my mammogram, make sure I'm going to be around longer too.
And that's not a message from her mom.
So, but one of the things, that we found, I think resolving, like, communication obviously is key. You're always communicating at some point. But I think what kind of separates you out is when you're deciding in those moments when honestly you don't want to communicate, or what you do want to communicate.
It's not socially acceptable.
Yeah, you might need to add it on Facebook, or you're going to earmuff your kids for, or, yourself. Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Mers. See, she said I would never say anything to upset you. And yes. So in those moments is where we've kind of when Brian brought me this whole research, because when we get in an argument, you go Southern on me. Like, seriously, I'm not kidding. All of a sudden, he comes out with some weird Southern, well, not weird Southern accent, okay? But he lives in this,
all of your Southern arts, you know.
But all of a sudden, it's like he just, this another voice comes out of him. We're listening to a Southern accent. I'm just like, immediately when that happens, which sounds bad, but I'm just going to keep it real, I know that I've won the argument. Because I know anything he says now, it's not going to be really put together. It's going to be more like jumbled, and it's going to be a lot of like, well, if you had just, well, fine, I never do anything right. And that's part of it. We've realized for us is one of the things that we've talked about that we're not going to say is you always do something or never, or, you know.
And the other thing too, as you were talking, is like you said, when you know that I start going into that mode, that you've won. But here's the thing is, what is winning in conflict resolution? You know, is that, I got it this time, I proved my point this time, or is it we've gotten to reconciliation, we've gotten to solve this issue together? Because the winner, if somebody, you can win the battle and lose the war. You can win all these arguments and be right, or and have somebody who doesn't want to communicate with you, or you can say, you know what, even though I may be right, do I really need to win this, or do I need to reconcile this? Does this need to be, is this something that's bigger and greater than my ego or my pride in terms of winning an argument?
Yeah, and it was interesting. I mean, I don't even know if this is totally off topic, but it popped into my head when I was talking to some moms, and one of the things that we brought up is like, of our frustrations, is just when we are like, how many things we plan every single day. Like I just told a couple friends of mine and my husband, I feel like I'm an executive assistant, like a personal assistant. I'm picking up laundry. I'm dropping stuff off at the dry cleaners. I'm packing lunches. I'm arranging play dates. I'm, coming up with all these like little things constantly, like, oh, can we do this? Can you make sure this is in my line? I mean, it's like, I don't know how personal assistants do it, And sometimes I know for like women, we're looking for our husbands like in an area to step in and help us, is like, on date nights or just taking over the planning or something. And one woman said, like we're talking and she mentioned how her husband was going to like plan something, but then he asked, well, where would I put, like, instead of just making the reservations for the restaurant, like, he's like, sure, what do you want me to make it? So, but then we're still planning it, and I know you're a little bit like that. Like, well, you'll ask me.
Well, and there's
trying to get a little insight for all of us ladies.
Well, and here's the thing is, there has to be control given up. If you truly want something to be planned, it's like, even if it's not like your best thing or your, just like the ultimate dream or desire, and he's making that effort to plan and to do it, and if it's not like, it's he's making the effort, he's taking it off your plate. It's kind of like there's a leadership rule that I had learned is, I could do it right 100% of the time, the way that I want it, or I could train somebody up, and yeah, they probably do it about 75% the way I would want them to do it, but they're doing it. And so when it comes to things like things around the house, planning, I know that we get into modes to where we want it done a particular way. When I have the girls help me clean the garage, I want it cleaned in a particular way. When Regan wants the dishes put away, she wants them put away a certain way.
Yep, dishwasher.
And so it's basically, but here's the thing is, would you rather just have it done and, and it's done and you didn't have to do it, albeit it might not be as good as you would have done it, or but it's getting in that direction. And so as as we do that, we have to realize that, as we're working together, sometimes things aren't going to be as perfect in a sense of how we want them done. But that's just going to hopefully further and foster communication as we go further along into this. So it's almost in a sense of that relationship kind of trains and cultivates what the expectations are, in a sense.
Well, and with that, because she even said, she's like, the hard part of us as women, if we're giving the instructions to our husband, is not to get bitter that they said, oh, yeah, I'll do the thing, and then we're still asking them to plan it, and which, you know, leads to isolation because, as you know, it's probably the easiest place to be isolated is when you're married, which sounds insane, but you know what I'm talking about if you're out there and you're married. You know, we're both laying in the same bed, but it's like worlds apart. So I just think that's probably like, you know, it's one thing when you're already in the midst of conflict, but it's another of like, how do you even avoid that? And we have tried to be
and not even how to avoid it, but how to navigate it in a way to where it's actually building, not separating. Yeah.
How would you do that? How do you think we build and not separate?
How I've done the last few years.
Why don't you just keep me pregnant.
Yeah.
It's like, then I can blame it on hormones all the time.
Just blame it on the pregnancy hormones. Well, there's 3 different ways of I guess you could almost say incorrect communication or responses, and one is being passive. And passive response is basically not really engaging in the moment, just kind of sweeping it under the rug.
For all the passive people out there.
And so normally that kind of person will not deal with the situation head on and hope that it eventually will go away. And many times, if not almost all the time, it won't. It'll actually get worse.
Yep. You know some people like that, don't you?
1 or 2. Another way is aggressive, and aggressive is almost kind of like a person who kind of goes after and almost tries to force or shape people into their way.
You watching, Dad? So shout out to Doug Kelly right now.
And so but what happens is a lot of times that can lead into controlling. That can lead into even manipulating circumstances and situations to get people to do what you want. And you're always in a position of kind of having a hand on that. And then there's passive aggressive, which basically is up front will say, I'm good, I'm okay, but will have an underlying current that will be probably as destructive, if not more destructive, because it's suppressed and held down and eventually will blow up. All the while, the surface is saying, looks good, almost kind of like a volcano. Everything is good until the eruption. But for so many years, there's been just bubbling under the surface. Yeah. And that when that last crack allows that molten lava to just shoot up, it does a lot of damage. And so that's a lot of times what can happen with passive aggressive ways of handling conflict. And but the effective form of conflict resolution is called confrontational. And that's basically...
That's me.
So that's basically where it's not just a speaking into this is what it's doing it my way, or no your way is fine, but it's a way to say, hey, if somebody hurt my feelings, I'm going to let them know, but I'm not going to. I want to let them know in a way that doesn't come across threatening or say you did this. But a lot of times it's reflected in I statements in a sense of saying, hey, I was really hurt whenever you had said this, and I want to get past it. Can you help me get past that? And what that does is that takes the defensiveness away from the person who said the thing.
Instead of saying,
you said
why did you do this?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, I was hurt
mm-hmm.
when you did this.
Yeah.
If you just like coming out with the emotion. I just like to cry right away now. I feel like that does a little bit more, like, then I don't even have to talk. I just start crying, right?
Sometimes.
Somebody's crying around this house, so.
Yeah, well, with five girls and a girl dog in the house, somebody's always crying.
Yeah.
And it's always me.
Yeah, I think honestly, like, if I could, because I'm definitely more the confrontational personality, mm-hmm. which is, it sounds bad, I think, when you say it, but it was a total gift that God, like, I was raised in a family like that, and it's just the way we communicated. So there's never, generally there's not anything simmering under the surfaces, but at the same time, that confrontational personality can be a little bit like, I mean, I'll recognize it. Big girl, just too much to when you're not, that's not what you're used to. That's not how you were raised. That's not even your personality type. And so it can come off kind of aggressive. And we've found our own, like us just together, our couple struggles have been when I'm ready just to tackle something and he's ready to like think on it. And for me, the longer he's thinking is the madder I'm getting, So we've tried to adjust, like on my end, I've tried to adjust, like trying to just be like, you know what, you need space. I start praying in tongues and asking the Holy Spirit to come over and start talking to that guy. And then I know for him, like to compromise with me, I've noticed that it's been less and less time that you need from when something's raised that we can talk about it.
And when something's raised, obviously you can tell that I would never be a lawyer because, it's
a Southern lawyer maybe.
But, just because I know that when we get in the heat of the moment, I'm that physiological example that I explained earlier. All the blood rushes from the frontal lobes of my brain, and I don't think rationally. And so part of my stepping away is I've got to just calm down, allow God to speak to me what needs to be said. Is it an area that I need to humble myself and realize that I was wrong and approach it that way? Or is this something that, yes, this is, I'm right in the sense, and yes, this time it's worth standing and fighting for, which I come from a very passive background to where you just kind of sweep it under the rug and hopefully it goes away, or you hope somebody else will come and deal with it for you. And so that's been interesting for me to be able to have to learn to go, to learn how to deal with a confrontational person, almost, sometimes aggressive, I felt, and
you gotta meet my dad. I'm gonna bring him on one time, and then you'll know where this aggression comes from.
But
it's hereditary.
It's but the thing is, we both have learned how to like the 5 love languages speak, in a sense of being able to show love in the way the other receives it. I believe that there are love languages of communication to where we're able to resolve conflicts in such a way that the other person doesn't feel alienated or pushed away or neglected or iced out. That we can find a way to be able to speak to each other so that we can come to that resolution and be able to just solve the issue.
Absolutely. And I feel like too, we run into a lot of people where it's like maybe the wife is going to church or the husband and the other's not, and so they have a different set of values. And in the end, I kind of feel like it's like you treat others how you want to be treated. So maybe I am right all the time in our arguments. I'm not saying that's true. I don't want God to strike me with lightning right now, but
I'm going to scoot over here a little bit.
But at the same time, like, who cares? It's like he said, if you win the battle, but you lose the war. And in the end, we're supposed to treat others how we want to be treated. And so if I'm just there and with my mastery of words, winning every argument with you,
but whittling down the other person to where,
so that in the end you don't even want to have an argument with me. You're just like,
and that spills over into times when there is no conflict, to where it affects that interaction and dynamic. And so
because I still remember when you told me, we've probably been married like I don't know, maybe 4 years, I don't know, who knows, we've said a couple times, and just like you felt like we were more roommates. And I felt like that just kind of came because, it's just the communication. Like, it was just the communication. We had unresolved conflict, maybe a disagreement about something. We didn't technically resolve it. We just decided to agree to disagree, but not in a good way. Okay. And before you know it, then the only things we're pretty much asking each other is like, okay, well, can you pick this up for the kids, or can you get that? And it's just, you're almost like little robots with each other, waiting for the other to bend. And yeah, it's definitely not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, it's Sunday night, and what would be your parting thought?
My parting thought is, when it comes to communication and conflict resolution, I know last week we touched upon it, and normally anytime we discuss relationships, and whether it's communication, whether it's boundaries, different things like that. And I think we mentioned it last week, was the whole culture of honor is, if the way we hold or resolve conflict is honoring the other person, then we're going to be seeking the right things in that conflict. And I've realized that as we've had opportunities to get into conflicts over the last few years, we've really focused.
Every day we get opportunity. After this,
4 little opportunities every day.
After this, we'll be putting the kids to bed, and that'll be another opportunity between the two of us to decide.
But who does what. When we're resolving that conflict, it's if we take the stance of saying, hey, I want to honor you, even though you just gave me a tongue lashing that has made me almost tuck my tail in between my legs. But I'm still going to respond to you with honor. That's basically, saying I'm still, no matter how you treated me or how I felt like you treated me, I'm still going to, treat you in the sense of how, God would see you and treat you. And so as, my parting thought would be, always putting in that position of a culture of honor where we're not controlling. A culture of honor says, I'm not going to control another person. I'm going to love them. I'm going to connect with them. I'm going to help to build towards a common greater good for our relationship, so that we can be closer. We can be more of a team.
Yeah. And my parting thought, my deep thought for the night. I'm amazing in mornings. At nighttime, my brain's already switching out. Would just be. Did I tell the emotion thing last week?
I can't remember.
I'm gonna have to say it again. It's just, for women, get control of your emotions. All right, emotions are like children. You can't put them in your trunk, and they shouldn't be driving your car. So for me, like, just not letting them drive my car and get me worked up. But yeah, I was listening to Ryan Lindsay, sort of. I did break out for a minute there, but yeah, anything that's worth having is worth the work. So know that, ladies. Right?
Yeah.
And what you love, talk about it. So this week, try to just say something nice to your spouse, build them up in a way, and then just post some of that. Let us know what's going on, and any questions between Ryan and I and our other SVS ladies, we're happy to answer it. You guys have an amazing week, and I will be posting, maybe I'll be going live tomorrow from my mammogram session. I don't know if I can. Wow. Have a great Sunday night.